Welcome, Seattle Seahawks fans and NFL fans across the world, as we are today discussing the 2022 Seattle Seahawks and how their season went down. Even though disappointment in that second half against the Niners, to come from where they were supposed to be to where they were, absolutely phenomenal. We're going to be talking to the hosts of Local Football Flavor, who have collectively watched over 1,000 hours of film this year to give accurate knowledge of what the 2022 Seattle Seahawks were. Enjoy. Welcome to Local Football Flavor, connecting the fan bases of the NFL. Welcome, Seattle fans, and obviously disappointment the way that basically the Niners had the way with the Seahawks in the playoffs. But that does not mean that this year was a disappointment or a failure by any stretch. Let's remember that entering this season, it was projected that Seattle would have had a top 5 draft pick. Now they ended up doing that, but not under their own merit. That will be a conversation for Denver at a different day. But when we're talking about the Seattle Seahawks, there was a lot of great things that came out of this year that seemed seemingly unexpected. The first and foremost on this list is Kenneth Walker. This was an offensive line that already had pretty decent run support in the previous year, running the ball very well, particularly to the outsides. But once Walker truly turned on to this season, the offense took itself to another level. Geno Smith was very good at checking down his first reads, especially outside of the numbers, where he was able to show the open seams that were created and really exploited by Lockett. Lockett was a type of receiver who did not crave impact by any stretch of the imagination, but when he received the ball in open field, certainly was able to run downfield, give you some yak, and quickly step out of bounds or take a knee prior to the impact. So overall, Bob, I want to have your initial impressions of the Seattle Seahawks and how they did overall.
Well, honestly, to tell you the truth, Joe, nothing that they did this year was super impressive. When you really look at the numbers from a quarter to quarter or a half to half standpoint, one of the things that they actually, despite the numbers that Kenneth Walker and Geno Smith were putting up, because believe it or not, Geno Smith was the most efficient quarterback in the NFL. His completion percentage was top notch. I think his was 69.9, one of our favorite numbers, percent. And the stats and the eye test show that Geno Smith is capable in intermediate throws, in short throws, and most importantly, in deep ball attempts. He has two of the best wide receivers that you could almost ever have in the current NFL for deep balls together on the same team with contractual obligations all said and done there. DK Metcalf is a big-bodied wide receiver, and most quarterbacks would dream to have a guy like that on their team. Tyler Lockett goes down the field and catches balls. Now, where the problem for the Seattle Seahawks offenses and Geno Smith in general is the fact that they do not hold on to the ball very long throughout the game in both the first half and the second half. And Geno Smith is one of the worst quarterbacks at putting his receivers and putting just in general, the ball in dangerous plays, okay? And so when we're talking about dangerous plays, those are plays that could have went the opposite direction. Geno Smith is in like the top 10 of quarterbacks that do that over the course of the year. And you could see that as evidence in a couple games this season where he's just chucking the ball, throwing the ball intermediate or chucking it deep, and he doesn't really care where it's going. It's put in the vicinity of his wide receivers, and he's smart enough to usually not make that throw again. However, it's very problematic. And with the way that the Seahawks have played this year, and the reason why I say nothing was super impressive, is the fact that when you look at what Seattle did on offense, it was as a result of being under pressure a lot. The offensive line did start to congeal as the season went on, but unfortunately, Geno Smith was either pressured or on his butt almost the entirety of the game. And this goes to show you that Geno Smith is actually a really good quarterback, because if he actually had time to think through his decisions, he probably wouldn't be making any of those dangerous throws. However, he wasn't. And because of that, he had to run for his life or he got sacked. Now, where Kenneth Walker came into play, and the reason why Kenneth Walker had pretty much a great season by all intents and purposes, he came in, I believe, like 4 to 5 games into the year and ended up racking up 1,065 yards or something like that. He didn't catch the ball very much. They didn't want him to catch the ball very much. But the guy thumped it. He would go in the middle. He'd go on the outside. He was pretty good as a running back. I mean, there's nothing to say wrong about Kenneth Walker. If you look at all running backs over the course of the year, he's definitely within the top 20 of guys that you'd say, hey, I want that on my team. And out of all the running backs in the NFL that have played this year, he needs to be a featured back. And I think, Joe, that you can agree with that fact that if they featured him more, this would be a different Seattle Seahawks team.
Yeah, so Seattle, in terms of their time of possession and specifically running through Walker, had two unique qualities to them. They ran one of the slowest play rates in the NFL. And they did this very consciously because the less plays that they run, it's because they're sitting on the ball, is the plan. That works when you have Kenneth Walker. As Bob mentioned, Geno was the most efficient quarterback in the NFL, which leads to not incomplete passes. Said another way, the clock keeps running. And that's very important when you look at Seattle, because overall their defense was only the 20th defense. Very bottom of the third, nothing to write home about. And when Seattle got in trouble, it was normally because their defense. You would think a team with Metcalf and Lockett would want to just continually push the ball and almost become like the Packers, where they just get in modes and throw it downfield, regardless of the game situation. But that is not what Seattle did. Particularly as the year went on, when Walker returned, they really settled into run the ball, control the clock, try to keep the defense on the bench as much as humanly possible. Geno Smith was one of the quarterbacks in the NFL that was unfortunately handcuffed by this type of philosophy, where when he wasn't given the chance to throw dramatically in terms of proportionate rates of the rest of the league on first and second downs. So he was essentially put in a spot of handoff, get us the first down, Geno. Handoff, get us the first down. Now, the weakness that Geno Smith had was that once he started running or getting rattled, it never really went away. And this is where we would see happy feet and mistakes. And to give an example, when they played the first game of the year, or correction, earlier in the year, when they were playing against, excuse me, when they were playing against Atlanta, Atlanta got no pressure on them virtually the entire game. Then Atlanta gets a sack on the second last play. Geno Smith forgot about every single snap prior to that, ran around with happy feet, and forced a very bad interception. One of the few truly awful plays of Geno in the season. At the end of the day, when I summarize what Seattle did, was they recognized their biggest weakness, despite the fact the media didn't think it, was not Geno Smith. Their biggest weakness overall was the defense. And what they did was create an offense that was able to hide their biggest weakness. And as a coaching staff, there's nothing you can really ask more. So, Bob, I want to give you a chance to bring home the final thoughts of what the 2022 Seattle Hawks were to you.
Yeah, so I had a lot of high hopes and mid-season for the Hawks once we saw them doing well, because at the beginning of the season, nobody in their right mind had Seattle doing anything after the Russell Wilson trade. Everybody thought, boy, Geno Smith is going to kill them. Like you said, this defense, absolutely awful in almost every respect of the game. They were one of the worst defenses on rushing, 146 yards a game. They were middle of the road in passing yards. But what kept them in almost every game was Geno Smith's ability to get the ball downfield. And a team would never be out of a game if their quarterback is able to move the ball downfield. And with Geno Smith, the Seahawks have a bright future. Although he is older, they have a bright future with Geno Smith and Kenneth Walker. If they can get those pieces right on defense, this team could be dangerous going into next year.
Thank you for watching the Seattle Seahawks 2022. Over here, we got more of the NFC West and all the content created from local football flavor about them. Over here, the New York Giants.